What is bitrate? If you're a live streamer or you use OBS or a program like it to record video, you need to understand how to adjust bitrate for streaming or recording so that you can control the quality and also the performance of your live stream or your recorded file. It's not the easiest thing to explain, but I'm going to try to do it in the least technical way possible so that it's just easy to understand, and then you can walk away from this video knowing how to set the perfect bitrate for what you're doing. So there's a metaphor that I like to use that I think explains bitrate. Picture a sink in your home. Now, the final output of the water coming out of your sink is basically two factors. The first one is the width of the pipe that's servicing the faucet. And then the second thing is how open or close you adjust the knob to allow water to flow through. We can think of a data stream coming out of your streaming software out to the live platform, or the amount of data going into your recording file when you record in the same way. So let's start with the metaphor of the width of the pipe that's serving the faucet. So you have your scene, and within your scene, you have all these sources, webcam and game capture and all kinds of stuff making your layout and what people see. You also have your microphone and audio sources, and those also contribute to the total data load in order to present your scene. You may have a really high quality microphone and be using stereo. You may have a 4K game or video capture, really high quality webcam. And you may have set the properties of some of those sources to capture a lot of information. So in simple terms, let's consider that the most amount of data that you've placed into a scene and could go out into a live stream or a file. That's the width of your pipe. Now we'll move over to the second component of the metaphor, which is the handle that you adjust to open or close the amount of water that comes out of that faucet. Ultimately, that's the final output that your audience gets when they're watching your stream or they're watching your video file. If you open it a little bit, then only some of the total data will make its way out to the viewer. If you open it all the way, then all of that data tries to get out. Now that could be actually pretty harmful if you try to open the faucet all the way up. I'll explain that a little bit later and how to avoid that. I'm also going to show you OBS in just a second on where to set your bitrate and other things that you need to also set and consider. But the basic point here is that the bitrate that you set is basically how much you decide to open or close that to determine the performance and quality of what finally gets to your audience or in your recording file. Hopefully that makes it not sound too crazy. And if you're like some sort of video expert and I've messed up some part of the explanation, please mention it in the comments. But hopefully my explanation just kind of makes it practical. So how do you go in OBS Studio, set your bitrate, and ensure that other settings are really optimized for performance and quality? So first, we'll open up settings. And once we're here, there's a couple tabs that we need to pay attention to. The main one is the output tab. And in there, you're gonna see a field for video bitrate, but I actually want you to first go to output mode at the top and change that to advanced. There's a lot of reasons for that that may become obvious as we go through this. Now we have a streaming tab and a separate recording tab because you may want those settings to be different. So if we go through streaming first, one of the things that you wanna check is your encoder. That is basically whether or not you're using software through your CPU or hardware if you have a dedicated graphics card. And if you do have a dedicated card, you want to set it to that so that your CPU is not trying to run your whole computer and process your graphics. That's what a graphics card is for. So click that drop down, and if you see something with like an H, then that's suggesting it's hardware, and you'll probably see the name of the brand of your graphics card. Mine is an NVIDIA, so I want to select that. Now you're going to see a whole bunch of additional settings because your graphics card is capable of a few more things. So here's your bitrate field, and that's where you're going to enter your bitrate for live streaming because we're in the streaming tab. Now remember when we talked about how much you want to open or close? That's bitrate. And there's actually one factor that I did not mention in the sort of faucet metaphor that's actually super important, and that is your internet service provider and how much upload is available to you. Now, how do we check that? Really easy. Let's go open a browser. It can be Firefox or Chrome or Edge or whatever you use. And we're going to type in speedtest.net. Now, before you hit go, you probably want to close as many applications that are consuming internet bandwidth as possible. So close any other tabs and browsers that you've got going on. Hopefully you don't do this while you're live streaming, and that way you have as little data consumption happening while you do this test. So really easy, you're just gonna click go, and you're gonna let this thing run. And it's gonna check three things. First, it's gonna check your ping, which is just how quickly a piece of data goes out and comes back to you. Then it's gonna check your download rate of what is the maximum speed you can download something, get something from the internet to you. And then it's going to check your upload rate, which is how quickly you can send data from you out to the internet. Now, this is going to be expressed in megs. Basically, that's 1,000 bits. So 6 megs would be a 6,000 bit rate. Now, I have a fiber internet connection here at home, so my download and upload rates are pretty awesome. Everybody's going to have something different because we all have different service providers and different packages.
Screw you, buddy.
Plans. Basically, what you're doing by checking this is to figure out where your ceiling is for live streaming, which is your upload. So whatever upload number is here is basically the maximum amount of data you can try to push out without running into performance issues like buffering, lag, and stuff like that. Now you need to know that ceiling because if you try to set your bit rate higher than your ceiling, you're going to have issues. You're gonna lag, your stream's gonna buffer, it's not gonna be great. So you need to set your bitrate below that ceiling. And I recommend that you actually leave a gap. So let's say for argument's sake that your upload rate is 6 megs. Well, you don't wanna set your bitrate to 6,000 because you're touching that ceiling and the data output you're gonna have when you're live streaming is actually gonna fluctuate a little bit. So when it fluctuates above 6, it's going to suck. So you want to leave a gap. I would say if your speed test is telling you you have 6 megs of upload, then you probably want to set your bitrate to like 4, at max 5,000, because now you have a 1 to 2,000 ceiling gap to account for any fluctuations in data and prevent yourself from having occasional lag. But again, this is going to be different for everybody. If I streamed with a 6,000 bitrate, but I have a 715 meg upload ceiling, I'm more than likely going to have no problems. Now, there's another thing that's worth understanding, which is that various platforms will have a data ceiling of their own. So for example, if you're streaming to Twitch, Twitch can only receive a maximum of a 6,000 bitrate. So if you were to set your bitrate above 6,000 in OBS, it's not going to contribute to any improved quality for your audience. That is their ingesting maximum. So what you'd be doing is only harming yourself by potentially running into performance issues by trying to exceed that ceiling. So if you're going to stream to Twitch, the maximum you should ever set your bitrate to in OBS is 6,000. But that doesn't mean just go ahead and put 6,000 in OBS, because like I said, you have to know your internet speed and you have to know where the ceiling is at. If your ceiling is 4 megs and you put it at 6, you're gonna have issues. So now let's return to OBS and actually decide on some settings. In here is the default, and like I said, if let's say for example you have 10 megs or better upload rate, then you're streaming to Twitch, you might as well set this to 6,000 and then do a test stream and see how it goes. If you run into performance issues, you can start by reducing your bitrate. I would say maybe reduce it by 2,000 at a time. So if you're lagging out at 6, go down to 4 and see how it goes. And you can actually adjust bitrate while you're live. You don't have to go offline. There are other settings in OBS that you would have to go offline in order to change, but bitrate is not one of them. It will update in real time, and you'll start to see an adjustment in performance after a few seconds or so. Another thing to keep in mind is if you're streaming and gaming from a laptop, they just don't have very powerful graphics cards, and sometimes you can only choose software as the encoder. So it's not very powerful, and you may want to actually start off, even if you have a great upload rate for your internet service, at a lower bit rate, like a 1500 or a 2500. Yeah, it doesn't sound great, but performance is more important than quality. An audience can handle watching a lower resolution stream, but they cannot handle watching a stream that lags, buffers, and crashes. All right, so the next thing you want to look at here after deciding on a bitrate is your preset. And that's basically saying, what does OBS prioritize when making decisions about how to process your data? Is it going to prioritize quality, right? The visual quality? But that may mean that it might sacrifice performance in order to try to give you that quality. I like to actually set performance